Welcome to the Values Exchange podcast. I'm Mike Cruz, your host, private pilot, author of Saturday Every Day, and CEO of North Texas Wealth Management, a firm dedicated to values-based financial planning. This podcast uncovers the values and habits of highly successful people and dives into how it has shaped their success and what you can learn from their personal stories. Hi, welcome to another episode of the Values Exchange podcast. Today, our guest is the Managing Director of Client Success at LPL Financial, which is a Fortune 500 company. Matt Enyedi is here with us. Great financial background and journey kind of to the top of the organization. He didn't start at the top. He worked his way up and has a unique story to share. He's here with us from San Diego. Matt, thanks for joining me.
Hey, Mike. It's my pleasure. How are you?
Hey, doing good.
I heard it's a nice cool day in Dallas today.
Yeah, it's always hot in Dallas this time of year. Nice. Missing that San Diego weather for sure.
We'll have you back anytime.
Yeah. So Matt, thanks for joining me. And the reason I wanted to have you on, I think you have a unique story to share. Of course, I wanted to kind of just talk about that journey and how did you get started in financial services to begin with?
Yeah, no, and thanks, Mike. And hopefully this doesn't put people to sleep. But, I started in this industry right out of college, first working with a boutique financial management firm. But as I was kind of going through it, what really got me excited about this industry was actually my mom, who was a lifelong school teacher, was working for a startup technology company in the late 90s. And like so many companies that had .com at the back end of their title, the company went public and had an astronomical rise in market value. And she didn't know what to do. She was a founder of the company, but like I said, was a school teacher by trade. And as I started digging into trying to help her, I fell in love with the markets. I fell in love with this business. And I was pretty confident that that's where I wanted to be. And so I actually started out in a rookie training class with an old company called PaineWebber that some folks might remember, was later bought out by UBS, as a rookie financial advisor. And did that for the next 5 years, from 99 to 2003, and learned a ton. But it was a hard go for someone who's just getting into the business at that time. And as much as I love the business—
That was a tough part of the year. Yeah, tough part in the market.
Right? Like 99, you couldn't be wrong. And then from 2000 to 2003, you couldn't be right.
Sure.
And I experienced a great deal of not being right. And this is where I always give Mike, you guys, so much credit. And honestly, why I love working with financial advisors to this day is having someone's livelihood in your hands every single day is a tremendous and humbling honor, but certainly challenging as well. And having gone through those 3 years with candor, I'm not sure I was up to that challenge because I was really struggling and making sure my clients were well taken care of. And so that was really the pivot when I joined LPL in 2003 was I knew I wanted to be in this business and I knew I wanted to help. What I didn't realize is my career in my next 20 years was going to be about helping financial advisors better serve their clients and not that direct to client conversation.
Right. So tell me about the leap. How did you make the leap to LPL Financial? What was your kind of starting role? And then we'll kind of talk about, how that led to where you are. But how'd you get to LPL Financial?
Yeah, when I left UBS, one thing that they taught us well was a better way to practice financial advice was through a consultative advisory relationship, making sure that you and your clients were on the same side of the table. And I really enjoyed that from the traditional brokerage of having someone pay for a transaction that may or may not benefit them. And so when I went to LPL, that's what LPL was really moving towards, this more advisory, financial planning based approach to working with financial advisors and consumers. And they needed someone who could help teach that process to advisors. And that's something I had been doing for a few years. And that was my first role at LPL. And as luck would have it, right when I came on board, there was an opportunity to go out in the field and work with our advisors and kind of really bring that to life. And for the next several years, I did just that, going door to door, city to city, town to town. In 2005, I did 250,000 domestic air miles meeting with LPL financial advisors. And the reality was, as much as I was teaching about fee-based advice or financial planning-based practices, I was learning a lot more about what the independent space looked like, about what the best advisor practices did to be successful and how they served their clients better than anybody else. So while I hopefully delivered a little bit of value to our clients along the way, I learned so much from advisors like you, Mike, along the way as well.
Yeah, I think that's amazing that it's the work ethic, right? You put in the work and you learned and then you got to apply it. So what about that journey to the top? How did you make it to managing director? What were these milestones along the way? And I guess what advice would you have to say to somebody that is, maybe new to LPL and has aspirations of like, hey, I want to be on the C-suite one day. How do you get there? Like, obviously it takes hard work, but what are those other intangibles?
Yeah, no, look, I don't know that it was the intention from day one to get there, right? It was just work hard, do your job, and try to solve problems for people. But, there's a couple of things, I'm now 20 years at LPL, and over that time, I think I've had 15 or 16 different bosses. And I've worked in 5 to 7 different departments and worked across the lines with a lot of different people and a lot of different clients. I would tell you a couple of the things that really stood out for me when I look back and I talk to younger folks who are kind of beginning their journey. I think the first one is there's this belief that you always have to go up for your next move. Hey, I'm an assistant vice president and I need to go be a vice president. Or, I've got this role and I need to go to a more senior role. That's the natural progression. I've actually found a couple of my very best moves were lateral. And I think a lot of folks underestimate the value of expanding your knowledge base and your capability set and going a little bit sideways before you go up. I think we sometimes get caught up in, hey, I've been doing this for a while, or the guy or gal next to me is moving up faster than I am. How do I catch up? And I think a better perspective is, how do I create more value? And how do I expand my own capabilities and skill sets along the way? So my first big move at LPL was a lateral move. I moved from being a assistant vice president in our advisory relationships organization to an assistant vice president in our strategy organization. Completely different. No travel, very little true customer facing kind of daily grind, and really working on what the next steps for the firm were. And that took kind of some street smarts and some execution orientation and forced me to pivot into thinking about what was next for the firm. And not only did it lead me to kind of exercising a different part of my brain and growing a set of my capabilities, it also put me in a space for a next big opportunity. Because the first strategy I worked on at LPL was rolling out or going into leading a program to build an RIA custody capability. And it was super fun to work on that strategy and learn tons about the RIA business, but ultimately ended up being the first hire into that business. And that set the next trajectory of my career off, where I ultimately went from VP to SVP to ultimately EVP, leading our custody business. So it isn't always a march forward. It's continuing to expand your capabilities and solving problems that I think helps you rise to that ultimate space you want to go.
Yeah, I love that. I think, like we said, it's really about making sure that how are you more valuable, right? How do you contribute more, add more to the company and your teams? Talk to me about that leadership. I think, as a financial advisor, I would say that I was very organized and very structured with clients. And then all of a sudden I found myself really, responsible for, hiring and managing and more responsibility. And one of the things I struggled with was just organization. It was like, I have emails and I have all these different kind of avenues and, I was very organized for the clients, but how do I organize for all this other stuff? So I had to kind of sit down and go, how do I get organized and how do I stay on top of everything? Did you find that throughout this, like when you started managing others and managing teams and projects, what were some of those like just milestones or challenges that you faced?
Yeah, no, look, it's a totally different world when you're going from one space. And I think about it kind of going from individual contributor to line manager to ultimately general manager. And each requires something different from you. But like you said, organization, structure, frameworks, that's not actually who I am. I am a much more kind of, I like to kind of use instinct, use experience, and use my gut to move things forward. But when you have to create scale and you need to create repeatable processes that are sustainable, it just doesn't work. It's a nice attribute to have, but it can't be the core of what you do. So I had to retrain my mind. Was I went from a individual contributor who could kind of grind their way through to the solution to a line manager where you still, while you had people underneath you, your responsibility was still to get to a more tactical outcome, to general manager, where a couple of things. I had a leader once tell me, Matt, you need to do less and lead more. And in order to take that leadership on, I needed to create a structure that would support me in doing so. In fact, Mike, we were just at LPL's Focus Conference, and we had this great speaker, Eric Wall, who's this creative artist who paints with his hands and his feet, and he moves really quickly and creates these great designs, and it looks like he's got chaos. But what he said, what I thought was very interesting, what he said was, you need to have structure to be able to be truly creative. You need to have an understanding of what your day looks like and the things that you're going to do to create the space and the bandwidth you need to have the creativity necessary to drive the firm forward. So I think a lot of us, and I'm guessing you're the same, I'd love to hear your thoughts, but if you kind of start with a more creative, innovative mindset, sometimes you think that gives you the freedom to kind of do whatever you want. And I would argue if you really want to hone that skill and create scale as well as innovation, you've got to put frameworks, really tight frameworks around how you run your day, around how you run your business, and around how you build that business around you. Mike, what about you? You're a creative guy. You've run it and built a beautiful business that's continuing to grow. How do you manage against those two?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, and I think, for me, I think there's just a couple of things that I built as a habit that have really helped me, and one is I always think that if I don't do anything else today, what's the most important thing I do, right? And so it's starting with the priorities, and then making a list, but then prioritizing, and then taking that and putting it on a calendar, right? So that it's not just a list, it actually gets accomplished, and it's an order of priority. And I used to do that with, even just stacks when we had lots of files, right? Now everything's paperless, and it was literally just putting my stacks in order, right? It was always start at the top.
Yeah.
And I think the second part is to start with probably maybe the thing that's most important, but also the one that you dread the most. Right. So if it's like, hey, you're going to study, well, start with a subject that is not your favorite and get that out of the way. And it creates more space and more momentum to get more done. And so, I've tried to instill that in my kids. It's like, do the thing that's hardest, do the thing you don't want to do the most, and then always start with really the most important. And just making a quick list of like, tomorrow, my list is these 3 things, right? And I just start with the first one. If I don't do anything else today, I might get really distracted with everything else, but I can't leave the office until I get this done. I think just to keep those balls always up in the air and moving forward, and just kind of that balancing act, right?
I couldn't agree more. The hard work first. There's actually a cool thing I saw too. It's by the founder CEO of Intuit, the way he runs his structured day, which I thought was brilliant, which is he actually sets a goal at the beginning of the year of where he wants to spend his time. 30% on strategy, 30% on talent development, 30% on operations, and 10% on career development, as an example. And then he color codes each one of those areas. And then he looks at his calendar, and every meeting that he does, he applies a color coding applied to one of those 4 things. And then every month, he and his team look back and say, hey, you had a goal of 30, 30, 30, 10. You really spent your time 10, 40, 20, 20. And is that right? Do you actually want to change your goals? Or do you need to better align your calendar and your day to the things that you've determined are most important? I thought that was a brilliant way and a really structured way to make sure you're executing on the things that you have prioritized as the most important things to do.
No, absolutely. Yeah, because let's face it, life is chaotic and hectic, and things become urgent, or there's fires to put out, and it's much, I don't know, maybe more rewarding to jump in and try to save the day and be that guy than it is to say, no, I'm going to do the hard work. I'm going to be proactive and sit here and figure out our long-term strategy. It's it's a little harder to prioritize those things.
We see this a lot. Look, especially coming out of COVID, when things were really moving rapidly and there were fires to put out every single day, you almost Like sometimes chaos can be a little bit comforting because you don't have to think, you don't have to plan. You
Yeah.
just got to be on your toes and you got to solve. Um, and that can actually be a trap because if all you're doing is solving for today's tactical challenge
Yeah.
and not thinking about the problems or the opportunities of the future, you're going to find yourself solving yourself out of business.
Right.
And so I think you're 100% right. Firefighting is necessary, but as you're assuming larger leadership roles, there are only a handful of areas that you can spend your time, and one or two of those can be on a really high impact tactical challenge. Most of your time needs to be, look, we have a formula that we use. I call it SECT or SECT. It's strategy, execution, culture, and talent. That's where I should be spending most of my time. What's the strategy of the firm? How are we going to execute that strategy? What is the culture of our firm? What type of culture do we want to perpetuate? And talent, am I attracting, developing, and retaining the best talent? That's where I try to spend the vast majority of my time. If something goes off the rails, there's from time to time I've got to go solve for it, but more often than not, I just have the people on my team who I trust and who are delivering me the information I need to making sure that it's getting back on the rails.
Yeah, and I think key word being trust. And anytime you're in a leadership role, I always like the saying that to be a leader, it's obviously people have to follow you, right? And sometimes that's in a position that you're in a leadership position. Sometimes it's just because you're leading the way and people are following you, and it's not necessarily a title. But talk to me about kind of your personal philosophy on leadership. How do you approach it? How do you manage that? How do you grow people on your team?
Yeah, look, this is one of the biggest challenges, and I think not every firm and not every leader is great at it. And certainly, it's an ongoing passion of mine to get better and better at it. Look, I try to operate my talent and myself under what I call a general manager framework. And there's really four things that I'm challenging myself and judging myself on, but I also look at my team for as well. The first is strategic agility. When you're leading teams, when you're leading a lot of people, you've got to be able to not just see what's right in front of you, but see around the corner and see what challenges or what opportunities are going to present themselves, and how do you think about going after what's next. So strategic agility is incredibly important in a world that's changing. The old days of 5 and 10-year plans have gone away. We tend to think more in the 2 and 3-year area. So you've got to be able to continuously pivot what you do. The second is operational excellence. My people need to be great at executing. As I talked about before, strategy is interesting. Ideas are interesting, but execution is everything. So how are they creating the framework and the structure to bring those ideas, that strategy, to life? The third one is decision making. Look, you're posed all day long with challenging decisions that you have to make, and you will not get them all right. But you've got to have a good data-based, fact-based, experience-based, and then client-centric view of what's around you and make decisions. And the reality is you're going to be wrong sometimes, but that's okay. In the spirit of the old Pixar saying, fail fast and fix it together, figure out which way you want to go, make that move, and determine whether that's the one you want to keep pushing on. And then finally, it's on talent. How do I attract it? How do I develop it? How do I retain it? So I'm judging myself on those four things every single day as a leader, and I'm judging my team every day on those four things. And then that last piece underneath that general manager framework is a set of intangibles like you talked about. How do you make sure you're creating and developing inspirational leaders? How do you make sure you've got a servant leader mentality? How do you make sure you're showing up with humility and curiosity? And those last two are probably what I think are the most important intangibles. Are you humble? Do you show up every day not thinking you have all the answers, whether you've been in the business for 2 years or 20? But you actually are open to new ideas. You're open that your ideas might not be the best, and there might be other ones around that you want to go attract. And then the last one is curiosity. Are you asking questions? Are you trying to learn more? Are you pulling on threads when you see a piece of data or get a certain piece of feedback from a client or a colleague, that you're continuously trying to inform a better outcome and be open to learning a new way of doing things?
Yeah, I like that a lot. And then, talk to me a little bit about this servant, model. It's kind of like the pyramid, right, or the triangle, and you view it kind of upside down, and the leader's role is really kind of support the team versus the other way around. How do you kind of visualize that?
I think you're only as good as your team when you're trying to create scale, right? And so and you have to be, the more you support your team, the more that you're going to be successful. And that's an awesome outcome. What it basically means is the best way to get the business moving forward is to make sure that your people are prepared to be the future leaders and they can go solve those problems for you. And so, or with you. And so you have to understand, and one of the things that we really focus on is really thoughtful and strict development plans. In fact, I was working on my own development plan this morning with my team on the areas where I'm focused on being better. And then not just, hey, here's the areas thematically that I want to be better at, but here are the practical applications where we can truly prove out whether I'm actually moving forward, and the bodies of work that I'm undergoing, and then the measurements to see if I've gotten better at those things. I think one of the best things that I've ever done, and it's a lesson I learned from Sally Larson, our head of human capital. She said, if your team comes to you with an idea that is, in your mind, at least 70% as good as the idea or the way that you would have approached it, go with it. Don't worry about that you might have something that you think is a little bit better. Let them go. If it's 70% as good, two things are going to happen. One is there's a chance it's actually significantly better than that. In fact, even better than your idea. But more importantly, it gives them the empowerment and the enablement to go make decisions on their own, to go trust their instincts and learn from both the positive outcomes and the more challenging outcomes. And so I try to show up with that in that servant leader mindset all the time is, don't be the idea guy, be our gal, be the person who shows up, listens to their team, gives them some ideas, gives them some kind of guardrails to work within, and then let them go shine. And if it doesn't turn out great, that's okay. Like, let's come back, let's learn from what we did there, and let's think about how we might pivot on it and do it a little bit differently next time. And more often than not, you get surprised, and that 70% idea is more like 110% of what your idea was, and you've actually improved your employees' satisfaction. They now have agency. They now feel like they have control. They feel capable of making decisions without you, and the organization has scale and leverage that it wouldn't have if it's just you making the decisions.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I think you're right. It takes a lot of humility to continue to grow, and I think that's an important role that a leader, basically has to set the example of, hey, I don't have all the answers, and I'm not perfect, and here's what I'm working on. I like that you shared, your growth model with your team, and then really help them kind of develop theirs. What types of things do you feel like biggest areas of growth for you?
This is the hardest one, is probably around talent. Like I've spent a lot of time over the last several years. My organization has grown bigger. And so scale is something I'm always thinking about, is how do I deliver not just a good outcome, but deliver that outcome to thousands and thousands of clients in a repeatable, sustainable way. And that shows up through really good frameworks, the right technology, the right formations on the field. But I think one of the hardest things is around talent, because while you want to develop all of your people and you want everyone to take that entire ride with you, the reality is that's just not going to happen every single time. And it's going to happen sometimes because you have the wrong talent, and sometimes you just don't have the right talent for the thing that you want to do next. And so you've got to be able to make moves on talent. And you got to do it in a thoughtful, respectful way. But there are going to be times where you are going to have to upgrade the talent to the challenge that's next for you. And that never feels good, and it never should feel good. But you've got to make those hard decisions on talent. And you look at any book by any CEO of a Fortune 100 company, and I've had the great opportunity of spending a lot of time with dozens of them and hearing them either face to face or in a large group setting. And every single one of them says the biggest regret is they didn't move on talent fast enough. And I take that to heart, because as humans, that's just natural that we don't want to have to do that. But I think the more we're able to do it, the better able we are to move the organization forward and make sure you have the right people on the bus for the challenge and the opportunities that you have in front of you next.
Right. Right. Yeah.
How do you do it? Look, I know you're a huge guy on talent, and you're growing your firm is an incredible pace,
Yeah.
and you've got another 20 or 30 years to continue to do it. And the reality is your goals will change over that time. The scale of your business will change over the time, and
Yeah.
your talent's going to have to change too. How do you think about making sure you have the right talent?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot different than LPL Financial. We're a small, firm in that we're a boutique, right? And so, we have typically about a dozen employees that make up our entire team, and so it is interesting. And over time, that team has evolved, and you really only have room for what I would call A+ players, right? It's people like you said that think strategically. They help the team. They help the team grow. They can plan and execute, and it's almost like they're an entrepreneur inside the organization. So, if someone's in charge of marketing, it's like they literally are making all the decisions for the organization around marketing, and acting like the CEO. And so it makes my job easier in that tactically, strategically, I'm not having to make every decision in the organization. And like you said, you're providing guardrails that are like, hey, is this congruent with our values? Is this going to help our clients? Is this going to help us, kind of win in the marketplace? Is this giving us a competitive advantage? So it's kind of thinking about the organization over the long term or over the next few years rather than making every single, decision. I think that's the key. But you're right. Having the right people on the bus, that hasn't always happened. And I think, too many times you don't want to rock the boat. You kind of give people maybe more chances, hoping that they evolve and change and they become maybe what the organization needs. But I think it's important as a leader, you realize that your responsibility is to the organization.
Yeah.
Making sure the company stays relevant for the long term, it's sustainable, and making sure you're delivering excellence for your clients. And sometimes that means, changing out the people on the bus. And it's always difficult.
Yeah, I used to always say to a previous boss, "Hey, I can get the person to where they need to be," and she would say to me, "But can you get them there as soon as you need them there?
Right.
And what's it going to mean to get them there that you won't be able to do because of it?" And
Yeah.
and you look, there's times where you are going to say, "You know what? This talent is worth the investment. I'm going to go spend that extra time to get them there."
Mm-hmm.
And there are times you're going to be like, "You know what? It might be worth it. I don't have the bandwidth to do it, or I don't have the ability to solve these other problems at the same time." But the cool thing is more often than not, when you have a good company and you have a good approach to how you run business, you're going to attract really cool people. And then you have a really fun challenge, which is how do you choose between the best people to bring on with you next?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, I think it's been interesting because there's times where I look out into the marketplace and, I'm kind of underwhelmed. I'm like, man, where is really the talent? And then occasionally, we have a new position available. We just hired a financial planner to grow our practice. And I was really impressed with the amount of talent out there. And I got to choose among the best. And I hired a gentleman that has, a CFP designation as well as a CPA. So it provided some, a tax expert onto our team, made our team better for our clients. So that was kind of an easy decision, and I'm really excited about that. But those are the times where it's fun because you're like, man, I get to choose between, like you said, the best, and that is a lot more fun.
Well, that's the cool thing too about how you built the business now. Whereas I'm sure earlier in your career, you needed everyone to be a generalist and could do just about everything. And now you've got such scale and such kind of growth that you can actually start to find specialists who are true experts in their domain, which allows you to really find the best of the best and ultimately provides a much better outcome for your client base too.
Right. And I think you bring up a good point. In order to scale, it is about having specialists. Would you agree with that?
100%. You got to have that right combination of generalists and specialists. But look, the world's getting more and more complex.
Mm-hmm.
And you as my client, your needs get greater all the time and your clients' needs get greater all the time. And a generalist just can't have the knowledge base or the expertise they need in order to solve for that. So specialization is going to continue to be a bigger and bigger part of what we do, of who we hire, of the type of talent we're looking for. And
Mm-hmm.
from what you just said, the same is true for you.
Yeah. And what would you say as far as, looking ahead, kind of for the industry, maybe for you and for LPL? We've been, I look back at one of my first podcasts. It was actually my second podcast. It was last November. And we had a conversation about AI. And we kind of talked about it in the framework of like what it would do to schools and education. And then fast forward, here we are, not even a year down the road, and it's completely kind of taken over. Every single software tool is implementing AI. Every company is looking at it. It's on the probably on the top strategic list of every single organization, and the capabilities. So, anytime there's a disruptor like that, there's pros and cons. What do you kind of see the industry doing with this? What is LPL doing? What do you see as kind of positive and downsides?
Yeah, it's funny, Mike. You're right. Like it happened so fast, right? It was only a couple of months ago where people were like, the robots are basically not going to have an impact. And then all of a sudden, Chat GPT and kind of generative AI really grabs the marketplace and grabs it at a pace and a speed we've never seen before. Look, we embrace change. I always say there's 4 things you can do with change. You can hide from it or ignore it, which leads to obsolescence and death. You can accept it, which leads to survival, at least for a short while. You can embrace it, which absolutely allows you to thrive. Or the best one of all is you can actually create it. And that leads to innovation and outcomes that are hard to match. And so we tend to live in those last 2 domains. We embrace and we see if we can actually create change. And we think generative AI is an incredible place for us to be. In fact, we're setting up AI labs, and we really believe this is a disruptor, but not to our business. And actually, we don't think it's a disruptor to the investment advisor or financial advisor population unless they don't leverage it. We think that the future of financial planning will be written by financial advisors, but it'll be written by those that leverage AI to maximize their breadth and depth and scale in ways that allow them to continue to focus on the things that kind of EQ side of things, the engagement, the understanding, the caring of people, and further scale and further enhance their capabilities, and not spend a lot of their time on things that technologies like this, disruption like this, are going to commoditize. And I think that's the key thing is, what will technology take or make something that was once valuable now a commodity? And are you still practicing the commodity business? Are you continuing to find new ways to drive value into the ecosystem and leverage the technologies and capabilities that provide those things at scale?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In fact, I guess I was just featured in the white paper for LPL talking about different growth strategies. And, one of the things we did with our organization is completely realizing that the future of, advice for for clients, the value isn't in what is my account balance and what's the trend over the time or the performance. The value is, do you have empathy when life, throws you a curveball? Like you lose a loved one, you don't want to hear from AI that, we really sympathize with your situation, right? You want to have that trusted relationship where they actually have empathy, and you already have the trust that they're looking out for your best interest. So that, when you're in those hard situations, it's hard to move forward. It's difficult to know what to do. And if you already have that relationship with an advisor, they can say, look, for our clients that have already been in this situation, here's where you need to go moving forward. Here's step 1. Here's step 2. In fact, here's a checklist, and let's just start at the top, and let's do the most important things, and we can do that in your own time, right? So, kind of getting our clients unstuck during those situations is really important. And I got to tell you, the one thing that I always underestimated is the peace of mind that you give clients, knowing that, hey, if something happens, especially like something happens to me, I want to make sure somebody's there helping my spouse through this during a difficult time, and getting solid, advice that's congruent with our beliefs and values and the way that we've been managing our money. And so it's an important role, and I don't see AI ever taking over that capability.
It's financial advisor as pilot, AI as part of your crew is the way we think about it, along with a lot of other technologies and capabilities. But I think you hit it right, Mike, and you and I have talked about this. The way that you all show up with your client's best interest at heart, with knowing them very well, with having gone through experience after experience, many times something very similar or identical to what they're going through, you're not, we talk about on the upside, which is you guys are dream makers, but you guys are life changers as well in those most difficult times in life. And we as humans need to know that someone cares and connects with us, as well as has deep subject matter expertise and experience. And the computers can help us with that side of it. But this true knowing and caring is what makes humans human.
Yeah. And so last question for you here, but as you kind of reflect back on your life, I always say, the biggest regret is not the things you did do, it's the things you didn't do. Kind of looking back so far and maybe even looking forward, as you look back on your life, what do you think you find is the most fulfilling and maybe the things that like you wish you would have done or you look forward to doing in the future?
This is, I just turned 50 this year. Yeah. I think the thing that I am most connected to is that you can be a lot of places all at once. In your business life, in your friend's life, in your family life, and you can scatter your thoughts and you can scatter your attention, and you cannot be present because you have so many other things in your mind. And I probably regret that the most, is not being fully present with the things that I'm doing at that time. And I work hard every day that when I'm at work, I'm working. When I'm with friends, I'm with friends. When I'm exercising, I'm exercising. And most importantly for me, when I'm with my family, when I'm with my wife, when I'm with my daughter, when I'm hanging out with my dogs or my mom, my sisters and brothers, I'm with them. And so that would be the thing that I tell you I work hard on every single day, is being fully present with the situation and with the people who I'm engaged with and connecting with at that moment in time. And I didn't always do that.
No, I love that. And I think, realizing that that's a gift. And that's actually something, I asked my team and I say like, hey, what do I need to work on? Right. And that was some of the feedback that they gave me. Like, hey, Mike, sometimes when we're all talking, we can tell like your wheels are turning and you're thinking, about like maybe the next thing. And I'm always planning and looking forward. And sometimes you just have to stop and go, how do I give 100% of my attention? How do I become a better listener? And, it's kind of a punch in the stomach when you have to realize that,
Totally.
You're not perfect, and you have a lot of room to grow, right? But that is something that definitely I'm working on as well, just being in the moment. And I kind of enjoy, these podcasts for that reason, right? It helps me practice this. It's like I'm listening to what you said. I'm zeroing in. I'm in the moment. And then I learn so much, and I get to apply that. So, Matt, lots of great information and things that we can all apply to grow in the organizations and, continue to help clients.
Hey, Mike, thanks for letting me join today. And I appreciate all you do for your clients. And it's a pleasure to get to be here with you today.
Yeah, we appreciate the support. So, well, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Values Exchange podcast. Coming up, if you've ever thought about being a private pilot, there's an airplane that has a parachute for the entire aircraft. It's Cirrus Aircraft. They've, passed up other manufacturers as the most successful personal aviation company. And we're going to interview the CEO coming up next episode from Cirrus Aircraft. So stay tuned.